On the 6th of April 1896 in Greece, a few lads met up to have a little sporting competition called the Olympics. And at this very first Olympics, there was the incredible ancient sport of gymnastics, where the world would see these incredible athletes doing these amazing acrobatic flips, feats of physical strength, and the weird thing they do where they sort of just jump and kick the air. I don't know what that is. Jump forward 125 years for the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. Gymnastics has been on a gradual downward trajectory for quite a while now, but strangely not in popularity. People still love watching it, but more so in participation. In today's video, we will explore the strange death of gymnastics. On the 9th of April 2021, the Associated Press put out an article saying the following: Olympics gold, men's gymnastics struggling to survive. As a freerunner, which will become relevant in the rest of this video, there is a small part of me that kind of smiles when I hear that. For some pretty unjustified reason, us freerunners have this sort of deep-seated hatred towards gymnasts. However, there is a small part of me that sort of feels sad for the sport, the pioneers of throwing your body into weird shapes, hucking it and just hoping you'd land on your feet. In another article from The Lantern, in 1969, so 30 years, about 50 years ago, the NCAA men's gymnastics had more than 210 programs. Today, just 15 remain. This drop from the original 210 programs down to 15 works out as a 92% drop in 51 years. What's weird is that it's specifically men's gymnastics. For some reason, young lads don't want to dress up in a leotard, point their hands and do backflips anymore. But why is that? This is an important question, and there are a few theories as to why. This question led me on a 5-hour Google rabbit hole, so this is what I've learned. Strap in. Before we continue with the video, a massive thank you to Morning Brew for sponsoring this video. Now, before subscribing to Morning Brew, my mornings would basically be me waking up, picking up my phone and scrolling aimlessly through Instagram. And I can't lie, I don't think it's a good habit. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter from Monday to Sunday. It's a quick and easy read that in 5 minutes will get you up to date with everything you need to know in the business world. If, like me, you find traditional news sources dry, dense, and just a bit boring, then you're gonna really enjoy Morning Brew. The articles are witty, relevant, and informative. This morning I read an article all about the rise in meme stocks ever since the whole GameStop thing, and it's really interesting. If you're interested in business, finance, or tech, there's honestly no reason not to subscribe to Morning Brew. It's completely free and it takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. So you can massively help support the channel if you click the link in the description and subscribe to Morning Brew today. Anyway, back to the video. To get a clear picture, we need to go back to the 1976 Olympics. Now, this whole story is to do with American gymnastics, because they're the one having this massive decline. Now, prior to this Olympics, the American team weren't that great. But after developing gymnasts through the NCAA programs, America was starting to do okay on the world stage.
History was really made. Peter Corman became the first American to win any medal in men's individual gymnastics since the 1932 Olympic Games.
The first breakthrough came at the 1976 Olympics, where Peter Corman won bronze on the floor exercise. He competed for the Southern Connecticut State University, and that very school no longer has a men's gymnastics team. In 1978, Kurt Thomas, who was a collegiate gymnast at the Indiana State University, another school whose team no longer exists, won the first world title for the US men's. Kurt Thomas brought to the sport the new move at the time of flares.
Now watch this, is Thomas Flair on the floor.
You think they're paying attention in Terre Haute, Indiana?
The crowd loves him. Listen to the reaction.
Back then, bringing new moves and exciting innovations to gymnastics was celebrated. They would bring a new excitement to the sport. People would look forward to these competitions because they wanted to see people do new things.
Add it up.
Unfortunately, Kurt Thomas never fulfilled his Olympic potential due to the US boycott of the 1980 Moscow Games. He instead retired from the amateur competitions he was doing to take advantage of the lucrative opportunities that had come his way, including a multi-million-dollar contract with SeaWorld. I'm guessing that boy was like doing backflips off of fish. For 3 years later in 1979, the US men's team won bronze at the World Championships in Texas. Half of the 1979 team went on to compete at LA 84, where they actually won the gold medal over the defending world champion, which was China. At this point, gymnastics in the USA was really popular. However, just 10 years after that US win in Los Angeles, UCLA announced it was cutting their men's team. This is the very same university that trained half of the 1984 gold medalists. And what's weird is like that university's team was popping. Two years later, UCLA were on another rampage to try and get rid of gymnastics, and they threatened to get rid of the women's team. But what UCLA didn't know is that the women's team had a cheeky little weapon tucked up their arsenal. Wow, that's not what I meant to say. And that weapon was called Title IX. Title IX is a federal civil rights law in the United States of America, which was passed as part of the Education Amendments of 1972. And it prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or education program that receives federal money. So I tried to explain it, but it got really confusing, so I'm going to try and simplify this whole thing. Let's say a university has like, I don't know, a $20 million fund for their sporting department. That's the budget that the uni has set aside for sports. If that university is 55% women and 45% men, that 20 million has to be split 55% towards women and 45% towards men. Now the thing is, when it comes to men's sports, a massive percentage of their budget will go to American football, basketball, baseball, basically the popular sports, the ones that everyone wants to do. And so whatever little is left will go to things like gymnastics, wrestling, swimming, and basically everything else. And that is because American football, they make money. They generate the university profit through ticket sales to the matches, television rights, as well as companies like Nike who will pay for these big scholarships. Whereas the budget for women's sports, you won't see women's American football taking up all the money and leaving a couple pennies left for gymnastics. So this has led to some people critiquing Title IX. Some people believe that in the modern day, it could be argued that it discriminates against these smaller male sports because they don't make any money. And you can see in this graph a sharp decline in male gymnastics around 1991, because it was around this time where women were starting to use the Title IX argument. And as you can see, men's gymnastics has been suffering. Does Title IX apply to the money that those profit sports, like American football, does it apply to the money they make? Or does it just apply to federal money that the government has given the university? From my Googling, it seems as though it applies to both, but I'm not certain, so I have to be honest there. And annoyingly, I think for a lot of people, that little fact will change whether they think this is wrong or right. But this has caused a lot of people to criticize Title IX. Men's gymnastic departments and stuff have actually tried to use Title IX for their defense because they feel like they are being discriminated against. But then I did find one article that was a counter-argument to that claim, saying that it wasn't Title IX's fault that men's sports are being cut, but rather mismanagement of how the universities use money. With that aside, you're probably wondering, why are they cutting sports funding at all? Well, the NCAA are saying that the average cost per student athlete back in just 2009 was $253,703. 9 years on, this is now $395,972. So basically it's getting more expensive to cover the cost of these athletes. So as a viewer, this is probably leaving you thinking either that Title IX needs to be updated to like the modern day, or that the profit-making sports like basketball, football, they need to compensate for those deficit sports. However, I have a completely different take that has nothing to do with laws and whatnot as to why I think men's gymnastics is dying in America. And that is that it's kind of lame. Like, it's kind of boring. Okay, before you boo me off here, just hear me out. This is the part where parkour comes in.
3, 2, 1.
I told you it was coming. From researching into gymnastics and my personal experience witnessing gymnasts, to me, it feels like gymnastics is kind of an outdated sport. A sport that is completely suffocated by its incredibly strict rule sets. Ed Scott and Tim Champion are two top-level freerunners who basically defected from gymnastics to do parkour. And this is quite a common story amongst a lot of freerunners. There are so many freerunners that from a young age, when they were really hyper and energetic, their parents pushed them to go and do gymnastics, but they quickly grew sick of it. Gymnastics is extremely rule heavy, and ever since the Olympics became its main thing, the whole point of it is to be in the Olympics. It's all about competition, it's all about trying to get medals and compete. That's the point of the sport. And to be honest, it really shouldn't matter if the funding is being cut for gymnastics. If young boys were still interested in gymnastics, they would pay for a private class. Parkour as a sport, during its rise in popularity, received little to no money from governments, and yet it managed to grow massively. And birth an entire economy around parkour through coaching, classes, clothing. I don't know why they're all C's, but we'll go with it. And yet, parkour isn't an Olympic sport. Young people who go into parkour don't go into it expecting to be an Olympic champion or to get a scholarship to a prestigious university. They do it because it's fun. There's a freedom that comes with doing parkour. You can just do what you want. If you want to do a flip or try a weird move, go for it. People probably pat you on the back for it. Whereas gymnastics couldn't be more opposite. If you deviate even slightly from the rules, if you don't do that booky looking pose at the end of a jump, or point your toes, you'll get marked down negatively. Literally, nearly every single trick that you're seeing on screen right now would be banned in gymnastics. You couldn't do it. If you did this, you'd score 0. The insane marking criteria of gymnastic competitions strips people of their individuality and ability to innovate. If you step outside of the box of the allowed flips, maybe you want to try a flip off axis, you won't get points for creativity, you'll literally risk scoring nothing. There is a whole video on YouTube that talks about all the ridiculous rules in gymnastics. There are a bunch on there, but one of them is if you get a wedgie, you will be marked down if you try and fix the wedgie, which is obviously ridiculous, but a wedgie isn't at the end of the world. But one example where it just really sucks is Simone Biles. Simone is this extraordinary gymnast. She's incredible. She done a flip, which was later called the Biles, which was a triple double. This trick was marked down despite the fact that this was a game-changing trick because it was too dangerous. Olga Korbut was a legendary gymnast who completely revolutionized the sport. She was accredited as the reason that the 1972 Olympics gained mass attention for gymnastics. She was it. She was the reason. In her iconic bar routine, she does 2 flips, the Korbut flip and the layout dismount. Both of these are now banned from gymnastics. I honestly find it just crazy. If you take tricking, which is different to parkour, it's its own sport. Tricking, in my opinion, is what gymnastics could have been if their rule set wasn't as rigid as it is. The stuff that trickers do is just mind-blowing. It's insane. And the sport, monthly, is being innovated and leveled up. It's exciting to watch. And they do these new things that you never even imagined. Each tricker has their own style and their unique creativity. But if you look at gymnastics, you can hardly tell 2 gymnasts apart. And that's kind of the point. The marking criteria is so precise that pretty much any deviation is penalized. And gymnasts end up just becoming carbon copies of each other. And look, I of course get that gymnastics is incredible, still to this day. And I know the intention for them is to achieve what they consider perfection, thus all the pointed toes and all this weird stuff. But I just don't see how gymnastics has really evolved that much over the years. At least nowhere near the rate that parkour and tricking has. There are constantly new moves and new styles. You see it all the time. Half of what my channel is about is highlighting those evolutions. To young, high-energy boys who don't want to be told what to do, or how to do it, or when to do it, parkour and tricking offer them that freedom. A freedom that gymnastics just lacks. And it's no surprise that so many kids get into parkour at gymnastic centres? Because the gymnastic classes are just so strict and boring and repetitive. You just do the same flip, point your toes. And whilst they're doing that, they're looking across and seeing these free runners just messing around and having fun. Like, it's obvious to young people which one you're gonna pick. The really boring, super disciplined one or the fun one. It's a no-brainer. And the institutions of gymnastics even recognise this. That's why they create these knockoff things like 3G. And why FIG, the international body for gymnastics, has just claimed parkour as its own sport. And I think it is so important that parkour and freerunning and tricking, come on in here guys, are so careful when it comes to their competitive format.
Definitely a nice one-leg tunnel flip off that. Inward side flip.
The creators of these competitions need to be endlessly aware of their potential to stifle innovation. And look, that's a hard job. I don't envy you guys. The responsibility that is in the hands of the judges is massive because, like we see with gymnastics, it can shape an entire sport, all the way down to why people do the sport. Before the Olympics, I doubt gymnastics was what it is now. I'd imagine it was probably closer to parkour, at least in terms of like innovation and whatnot. Rules can make or break a sport. So good luck if that's your job. Oh, I almost forgot to say, we just put out some new merch on the Jimmy the Giant website. It's a really nice collection called Vision, and you can massively support the channel by picking something up. So head over to jimmythegiant.co.uk and do that. Also, you can donate to me on Patreon or help out by using the sponsored link below. Peace.